Hello and welcome to another modeling video. This is Alan from the Man at YouTube with another 3D printing modeling video. This time a commission build from a video game, Diablo 4 of Lilith, a little outside of my usual scope. The character is the main antagonist and a succubus with a fairly complex personality with very deep story and lore. This was a purchased file from a professional digital sculptor's personal website, selected by the client with non-lewd options and increased to an approximate 1/7 scale, or 250mm to suit the rest of the collection. The components were scaled, shelled with a 2mm inner wall, a few holes cut out where the glue points will be hidden to drain all resin and not to explode, then supported in an orientation where the nubs will be less likely to be seen or not obstructing detail. This was a part of my experimental stage to improve bed adhesion by making a grid on the bed to stick the raft down. All the parts were laid over across 3 beds and individual printing with about 100ml of resin each, and several hours lead time, taking a few days. I am using the Anycubic Mono X 6K 3D printer with heating band on the resin tank and an older UV shield with Sunlu standard UV resin in a flesh color. I find lighter pigmented colors much easier to print, stick to the bed, and has sharper details than grey or black. Made sure the resin was a toasty over 30 degrees Celsius, a slightly longer exposure time and slow retraction. 2 out of the 3 prints was absolutely perfect. One of them did seem to peel a bit due to a draft printing overnight in the dead of winter. It didn't interfere as there was very high supports under the wing. Each bed was spatulated into a metal container and soaked in methylated spirits or denatured alcohol, rinsed off and then allowed to sit outside to cure under natural UV light. Being winter, it would have taken approximately 3 to 5 days. I reclaim my alcohol and use it for approximately 20 to 30 washes. This process assures that excess resin does not cure in the detail, not sticky, and layer lines not so visible. I milked the deadline a bit. Building and painting was on and off for quite a number of months. Some of my processes are out of date. I am removing the supports, which gets a bit sticky underneath. This is not an ideal method to do so by tearing, cutting the nubs and sanding. Very inefficient and time consuming. My new process is dipping the raft and supports in boiled water and easily peeling it off. Others like to use a heat gun to soften the entire surface and do the same. Treating the nubs and pock marks is the same process. I use 3 layers of sandpaper around 180, 320 and 800 grit for a smooth enough finish and enough grip for primer and paint to stick on. I also find some prints with shifts and too fine of a tolerance to not snap fit together the best. These holes and pegs are widened and shortened with a Dremel tool. Nowadays I also use the Dremel to flatten any surface that the supports have been ripped off to save a lot more time than using a knife and sanding. Otherwise all the parts came out quite nice and cleaned up easy enough. I don't have too much complaints about how I chose to orientate it and clean up. The finished product does speak for itself, though due to the large number of parts and how much space they do span, this was on and off tedious process. Weirdly enough, I don't hate it, especially now using the boiled water method. Sadly, there is a bit of wastage with cured resin supports which cannot be recycled and disposed in general waste. I accidentally printed 2 of the exact same wing and had to print another 2 with another bed. Very frustrating and stupid of me. Hope someone buys them as parts. Moving on, I'm test fitting each component to assemble the figure to see how it looks, if there's any gaps, and deciding what I will glue together, what needs extra support and what needs a putty. I'm also thinking about painting and colour separation. Base thrown torso is mostly all the same colour, so I glued them together. I like using Saley's liquid nails or building adhesive as it's incredibly strong. It is very slow drying, not too tacky, but if it stands under its own weight, it's not a huge issue. Following up with general basic type seamline filler. Once cured and all excess material sanded flat again, each part was airbrushed with lacquer urethane automotive filler primer. Grey is selected as I can see if there's any major visual faults or any of the seams are problematic. Support nub marks, pock marks, visual and other issues. There was a few from my sanding, so we went back to the Dremel to grind everything down properly and resand and polish those areas. The seam lines also had to be re-sanded. Second layer of primer was also applied to promote paint adhesion. Last stage, painting, and this was the most daunting stage and what I put off the longest until I could figure out how to approach this. Technique wise, not an issue. I use a mix of hobby paints and automotive paints. Moving on to Hamer Colors, a local manufacturer, works exactly the same as Gaia Notes or Mr. Color. Thin it down in the shot glass to a viscosity where it transparently sticks and added it to an airbrush. A new Chinese make that's a clone of a Badger fine liner. For the black dark grey parts, everything had a pre-shade outlining all the lines. With grey colours leaning on blue, it would be built up. Nothing is dead black, and I didn't build up on black as it would just look flat. The flesh was incredibly stressful, so I stuck to the colours that I've recently had mixed and kept cutting grey, which gave a fairly warm and lived-in look, yet still dynamic and undead. Masking and shadowing was heavily employed. The base and other components would have its usual 3-tone to give cascading gradient light shade. Lots of hand painting and touching up of detail and some creative choices on the wings and other items of clothing. Once one component was started, everything just fell into place in my usual thought process and methods. This sculpt is amazing and a joy to paint. I mixed up a sludge watch bash of slow drying gum turpentine and Tamir accent colour, sludge washing the whole thing to capture all the panel detail, allowing a few days to dry, and a top coat of my own homebrew matte clear. Made up of automotive clear tint, 1/3 to 1/5 part of matting agent or clear matte from a 2-pack set. Then 1 part of that to 3-part thinner. A few shades to give it an absolute dead flat look. Solid few days for a full chemical hardening and finish adjustment. Reaching back to the building adhesive, laid each component each day and allowed to set. As everything can be supported under its own weight, this is just permanently affix it into one piece for the client. Client is a work colleague from another department at my day job. I was not the first choice of artist to complete this. Originally it was someone from the United States, but there was some sort of complication and I bid in a cheaper quote. A lot of communication occurred via email, showcased my portfolio and YouTube channel. With a deposit paid, the 3D file was downloaded and away I went with the occasional update of work in progress photos that are included in this video. The best aspect of commission work is seeing the client's excitement after unrevealing the work for the first time. It seemed to be satisfactory and I was very pleased with how this came out. Definitely one of my better pieces. I may be far from the best in 3D printing and kept experimenting and pushing to this stage, and wanted to share the whole process for others to do the same or see what's involved when receiving money and doing models for others. This video and project had a lot more documentation than normal, still sticking under their 10-minute limit. A ton of editing has also gone into this. If you feel inclined, please very much like and leave a comment, as it should do a little better than previous uploads of late. Thank you very much as always, and until next time, stay tuned for further content. Check out the description section down below for social media links, photos and other content, which you can also comment and interact with. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all also great platforms to be reminded of new Monday uploads, and we'll catch you guys next time. See you later.